Dan Millman's books and teachings have been a gift to millions. Now comes his story of his search for meaning in the modern world. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my very special guest is Dan Millman. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support and Happy New Year. Okay, Guys Radio, my favorite part of the show is when I get to interview some really interesting people, and I've got one of my favorite guests of all time. He's returning to Guys Radio. He's the author of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. His name is Dan Millman. For over 40 years, through 18 books and seminars, so many seminars he's taught, Dan has shown us how to live with a peaceful heart and a warrior spirit. He's also a former world champion athlete, which I love. He's a university coach, martial arts instructor, college professor, and dare I say, a true guy's guy. His seminal best-selling book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, was adapted into a feature film starring Nick Nolte. His latest book, that we're going to talk about today, is called Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, the true story of my spiritual quest. It's hitting shelves in January, and it's his memoir, life story, but with teaching. And he focuses on 4 key teachers that he worked with during the years that are really highlighted. And it's really an amazing tale. He shares his true story about his search for the good life and his reflections on the extraordinary experiences and teachers that shaped his evolution from youthful dreamer to spiritual teacher. And he's not done yet. Dan's wisdom and teachings are timeless. He's really helped me a lot. We were just talking before we went on air. I've been doing his Peaceful Warrior workout for about 4 years now. And I got to tell you, I feel and look better than I have in the past 20 years. It's just amazing stuff. And one of the things we're going to talk about is, guys out there, you know, as we age, us boomers out there, we don't have to let our lights dim. We don't have to wane. We can dial it up. We can be brighter and brighter and brighter based on the wisdom that we've garnered and put out there, and we can help other people and continue to help ourselves. So please welcome Dan Millman back to Guys Radio. I'm so glad you're here, Dan.
Well, I'm glad to be here with you, Robert. It's always a pleasure.
So let's start with the new book. In Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, you share with us 4 of the most significant teachers in your life, timeless insights that are relevant right now. What inspired you to write this book, and why do you think this was the right time for the book?
Well, you know, people have asked me, how did you get so lucky to have these 4 master teachers in your life? And I think it's because of an early commitment. Even when I was a young trampoline jumper, I loved teaching and influencing people. And so anything I learned, I'd like to share with other people, not just keep it for myself, so to speak, and improve it along the way if I could, the transmission, so to speak. So I think that was my primary motive that led me, that maybe opened me up, as well as some adversity that I had to overcome. It opened me to these 4 teachers. And people have also said, you know, Dan, what if you'd met them in different orders? And I don't think I could have or would have. It was organic. It was almost predestined in retrospect that I'd meet each one in turn. And they represent different aspects of the spiritual quest, of the search for enlightenment, happiness, meaning. And they took me one to the other. And I call them by, as you know, Robert, 4 archetypal names: the professor, the guru, the warrior priest, and the sage. But they had real names. They were very real people. One of them is still alive. And I spent almost 20 years studying with them, one after the next. And so I like to introduce to readers what drew me in. And I hope if I'm successful, readers will go, wow, I wish I'd had that teacher. But then I also explain why I decided to move on and what I learned from that. And some people, you know, they take a martial art and they stick with one martial art or religion or philosophy, and that's it, their whole life. And they can go pretty deep studying that. I've always been a generalist. I like to compare and contrast different approaches. And so I was probably a good vessel to convey this broader-minded approach to what we call the spiritual quest, the quest for happiness.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's not like spirituality. It's not one size fits all. Everybody has their own path, and it's not about judgment. Spirituality, though, is a term, Dan. It's all loosely thrown around today. Everybody's talking about spirituality and wanting to be spiritual. At this point in time, based on your experiences, what does spirituality mean to you, Dan? And has this changed over the years?
Well, I would say yes, in answer to that question. It has changed, but it's different for each person, as you know. It's like love, that can mean many different things: parental love, erotic love, romantic love, and so on. And the same thing with spirituality. Many people associate it with belief or religion, particular rituals or tradition. But when my daughter, who was a voracious reader, when she was 9, 10 years old, she was reading everything. And I once asked her, I said, Sierra, she's now a co-author of mine on one of my books on writing. I said, Sierra, which of the books you've read would you say are your favorite spiritual books? Can you write a list for me? And she wrote out a list of 10 books. And what was notable about that list was not a single one had any metaphysical or religious or new age ideas in it. They were books that inspired her, that uplifted her, that connected her with something that we all want. And that's why in the key terms in the beginning of the book, one of those key terms is spiritual. And I say that which inspires and uplifts. And of course, we know inspire means to breathe in spirit. So, and spirit's all around us. It's funny. Many people go, I wish I felt more spirit in my life, or more beauty, more inspiration. And I ask them, well, does the weather report every morning say 20% chance of rain and maybe 35% spirit out today? I don't think so. I think we swim in spirit. We breathe it. It interpenetrates us. The beauty, inspiration is all around us. But, and we feel it sometimes in moments. But most of the time we're preoccupied with what am I going to do about my relationship, my finances, my decisions I have to make, my physical ailments, and so on. So our attention is trapped by those preoccupations. And we have to travel to another part of the world to kind of wake up for a few moments and look at the world again with the eyes of a child and go, wow. When I'm in Europe, I go down the street in a trolley, a new experience. And I say, look, a laundromat. It's just a laundromat, but that's an adventure when you're in Europe. You probably experienced that.
Sure.
So I think that's the whole idea to me of spirituality, is that which uplifts and inspires us and connects us to the numinous, to the transcendent.
Mm-hmm. A terrific point, because so many of us, we fall into the trap, and it's understandable that we're reacting to life, reacting over and over again. It's like a Xerox copy, instead of being in the moment and experiencing life and letting spirit experience life through us moment by moment, and just being like right here, right now, and not being concerned about the other stuff. Sure, we all have problems, but we have to be present. And I think nowadays it's tougher than ever with so much going on. Dan, you identified 4 of your many teachers and shared tales and experiences with each of them that helped you grow and live your best life. Each had his own style of teaching, and each one affected you in a different way. And as men, they had their own issues to deal with along their personal paths and journeys. How did you select and choose these 4 mentors out of the many teachers you've worked with, including just the day-to-day people and experiences of life itself?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't have written the book if it were just about me, for example. But as you noted, I wanted to share and illuminate, shed light on everyone's path, this universal aspect of the path. And so I need to acknowledge in some of my books, there are female teachers. In one of them, there's a Hawaiian kahuna named Mama Chia. And in one of them, there's a timeless woman sage I meet up in the mountains. And my wife and others have been role models. So there are many women in my life as well. But as happens, these 4 primary mentors were all men, and they dealt with male issues in their own way. And in fact, one of the central themes I repeat several times in the book is that every teacher is human, and every human has flaws. So what we don't often grasp is a teacher can be an enlightened master teacher and still manifest issues of their own. In fact, well, I don't want to give away too much from the book, so I'm trying to avoid spoilers. But one of them took a technological approach, a step-by-step approach to doing various practices and then experiencing what those practices, where they lead, a clarification of consciousness, deeper self-knowledge, more physical vitality. Through the professor, gave us breath work, 50 different kinds of meditations. And I mean different kinds, different types of meditations for different purposes. Body work, profound body work. Like in Way of the Peaceful Warrior, I talk about this bone massage that my literary mentor Socrates taught me in that book. But I learned that from the professor, based on the Mongolian warriors had a way of trying to clear fear-produced tension from the body before and after they went into battle. So we learned many fascinating, esoteric, deep, profound, well-integrated exercises. And that was said to lead to enlightenment. That was the promise. But I'll leave whether that worked or not to another time. But I ended up moving on to the guru. And as many of us know, gurus have a different approach. Those who are true masters, illumined masters who were vanished, the ego is vanished, and the divine, let's say, the source, whatever we want to call it, shines through. It's surrender to that divine through the personage of that teacher. And that's how the guru worked. He once said, "I'd rather beat you with a stick than teach you to meditate your way to enlightenment." Now that may offend some people who do a lot of meditation. And meditation is a wonderful exercise, though it struck me at some point that meditation wasn't really about quieting the mind. It was about quieting the body.
Great.
And when the body is quiet and stable, the mind tends to mirror that. So anyway, there was that approach, which literally I spent almost 8 years as a student, as a devotee, in and out of the Guru's community, experiencing many things before I went on to the third and fourth mentors. And as you know from reading the book, they all had various kinds of challenges, physical and other kinds.
Let's touch on the other two. There was the professor, Oscar Ichazo, and he taught you, if I may, self-knowledge to the point of illumination, attention, and vitality through breath and movement, just as a kind of a header there. The guru, Franklin Jones, demanding everything and returning grace as an enlightened way of being. And then you moved on to the warrior priest, Michael Bookbinder, validation, opening new vistas. And along the way, for instance, with the guru, that's when you created the Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I mean, there's many renditions of that you rewrites and everything, but it seems like that came out of that period. And then when you were with Michael Bookbinder, you did Peaceful Warrior Workout and Life Purpose System, the life you were born to live. And you get to the sage, David K. Reynolds, reconnecting to life is what we do moment by moment with the support of others. And he got into constructive living and with Shimona Marita, and just there's so much there. 6 steps to enlightenment. And your book, Everyday Enlightenment, I think came out of that period. And that's my favorite book of yours because it's got 12 steps that are incredibly helpful and timeless, as well as there's the Peaceful Warrior workout embedded in the book. And that's how I discovered that. I found your book in a bookstore because I was thinking, and it shows how things are out in the field. I want to write a book with steps about becoming enlightenment, and it was done. It was there. And I think that actually what happened, it drew me to your book. And then I got out of it, the Peaceful Warrior workout, and I got a whole bunch of other ideas. But it seems like when the student's ready, the teacher shows up, and it certainly was the case in your life, and I'm experiencing the same thing. Could you talk about that a little bit for our listeners?
Well, I appreciate your bringing up that question, because many people might imagine, oh, well, Dan, then what he did was he shared what he learned from the professor, the guru, and so on. And there were periods of time where I started sharing some of what I'd learned, but I realized they were containers that needed to be done within that tradition from that person. I didn't try to teach Oscar's material. It had to take place in a particular way, but I gave people samples so they might want to do that training. The point is, the material, for example, in Everyday Enlightenment, which is one of my magnum opuses, it defines the entire arena, what we call personal development or personal growth, as you know. And that didn't come from any of those teachers. That they actually planted seeds that insight that inspired new insights. So what I share is my own unique expression. I couldn't match the professor, what he did, nor am I trying to attract followers as a guru who just sit with me. I don't do that. And the warrior priest was quite an adventurer, and it would be hard to match his charisma and his nature. He had his own style. But the summation of all of them, including the sage, I ended up, well, as my old literary mentor and muse, Socrates, once said, Dan, some people launder money. You launder spiritual teachings. So I try to express things without jargon or beliefs, in a way that is practical, can be used in everyday life. And so they inspired what I teach rather than my parroting their words. However, as you point out, and as I say in the book, yes, I wrote Way of the Peaceful Warrior 14 years after meeting that old fellow in the gas station who inspired the character of Socrates. And it was after my time with the professor, Oscar, and it was, well, toward the tail end of my time with the guru, again, after 8 more years passed. That's when I wrote Way of the Peaceful Warrior, somehow, using some autobiographical elements with some fictional elements I wove together to create a book to share what I learned in a way that people might relate to. And it turned out many of them did, several millions of them did. And yes, all the books that followed at least have a touch of the influence, as you pointed out, very strongly. Now, of the different, of the warrior priest, to finish the sentence, and the sage. But I have to say that one of my best-selling books, The Life You Were Born to Live, with a life purpose system to clarify some of the core issues of our lives, that came from several nights of lectures by the warrior priest. And I took careful notes and typed them up right afterward. And I had a total of 20 pages of notes. When I wrote The Life You Were Born to Live, about 9 years later, it was a 450-page book because it's a reference work with all the life paths. So I did expand from my own insights after working with this material, not just publishing his 20 pages of notes. Mm-hmm. So again, I want to emphasize that this approach to living I call the Peaceful Warrior's Way is, I owe a debt to these 4 mentors for opening me up to sharing what I've always wanted to share. One more thing I might mention, Robert, is that, as I mentioned in the book, I was really into self-improvement. When I was a young boy, I learned all kinds of skills. I mentioned with the bullwhip and frisbee throwing and juggling and ventriloquism and memory courses and speed reading. And one day though, I stopped short and I said, no matter how much I improve myself, only one person benefits. But if I can use that self-improvement to share with others, to influence other people, that made my life more meaningful. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. That's been my commitment. And I think that's what allowed me to share and acknowledge my teachers in a way that I thought was appropriate and might help shed light from many readers.
Absolutely. It's your service that really made the difference, it sounds like, Dan. My special guest, Dan Millman, the author of Way of the Peaceful Warrior. The new book is Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, the true story of my spiritual quest. We talked about the four mentors that you chose for this book. Was there, and they had their problems, one in particular had some issues, but was there a connective tissue between the four of them that impacted your final selection as to these were the four mentors that I want to focus on for this book?
Well, yes. And to completely answer what you brought up before, you said, why these four? I don't know why these four. It seemed like synchronicities in many cases. I described how I met the warrior priest just by coincidence. Often it seems to happen like that. Looking back, it was like, wow, if I just made a right or instead of left turn, I wouldn't have met them. So I didn't use them for this book. It's not like I've had 20 major teachers and I only chose these four. Yes, I've had many role models, male and female, in my life. My teammates, my gymnastics teammates at Cal, who are heroes in their own way, admirable people. I've met many people who were role models, and I mentioned that in the book as well. But rather than scatter it all over, because we've all met role models. We've all had teachers who inspired us. A few we remember maybe from school, but also in everyday life. We've learned from our parents positive and maybe negative examples as well. So I didn't just choose them arbitrarily to include in the book. These stood out in my mind above other role models and teachers. So,
okay.
As I said, I called a friend when I was traveling around the world on a grant as a college professor. And he said, Dan, I just finished this amazing training. You got to drop everything and do it if you can. And it turned out in that moment, I could do just that. So I delayed my travels around the world for 40 days. And I took up the Oscar's first training, 40-day intensive, 10 hours a day. And because of the group process and the way it was put together, it really accelerated my evolution. I learned things that many people don't learn in a lifetime, or several maybe. But that all happened because I happened to call my friend, and at the right time. So again, this isn't my way of telling people this is what you can do. I'm not trying to lay out a clear trail of breadcrumbs, even though that's my hope. I think in reading about my experiences with these particular teachers, I think the reader, this is what I'm hoping, will gain a vast perspective. And in a way, it's a cautionary tale too about the constant searching, the constant seeking, and how I finally came to rest. And so even though the specifics are not, maybe won't mirror what other people have done or gone through, people will relate to many aspects of the search and in their own life. And one of the fundamental aspects of what I teach is that there is no best teacher. I'm not saying my mentors were the best, but they were pretty good. There's no best teacher, religion, path, diet, exercise system, martial art. There's only the best for each of us at a given time of our life. And life is an experiment. We have to see what works for us. And those teachers apparently were the best for me at that time. And I'm very happy to have put in the work so I could share it in a way that might touch other lives.
Well, you did a terrific job. I really enjoyed the book. I read it over the weekend. Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit. Let's talk about one of your very, very special and most important teachers, Socrates, the character of the old man you met at the gas station in your book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. You come out and tell us now that Socrates is really you. I'm assuming your higher self, your guardian angel, whatever, your conscience. Talk to us a little bit about Socrates, what he is and what he means to you, and how you keep working with Socrates today.
Well, that's a lot. And I don't want to, really give a spoiler of any kind for people. I like to surprise them when they read the preface. But I have been very straightforward. I found the books of Carlos Castaneda. Remember him?
I read them
many
all.
years ago? Yeah. I read the first three, and I actually met him. I mentioned that in the book too.
Yes.
I bumped into him one day, again by coincidence. And he insisted the books were true.
Right.
I don't believe it for a moment. I really don't. But he created such an evocative reality, a separate reality, so to speak, that his book seemed real. And the difference between us is I've been straightforward from the start of letting people know Peaceful Warrior was autobiographical fiction. It's semi-autobiographical. It does tell, and people who read Peaceful Heart Warrior Spirit, the true story. There's no fiction in it. It's what actually happened to me the best as I can express it. So I've been straightforward. That book was kind of a new genre. I never called it a memoir. This new book is memoir.
Yes.
But you base it on memory, not make up stuff. Even though you have to reconstruct some memories, as we all do. So I was straightforward about that. And I did say that it was difficult to know, even from the preface or the introduction to Way of the Peaceful Warrior, my first book, I said it was difficult to know where he ended and life experiences began. I was hinting at that time. And he was a powerful figure in my life based on an actual cosmic old guy I met in a service station about 3 a.m, as depicted in the movie version of the book too. He didn't look like Nick Nolte though. I have to tell you, but Nick was terrific in the role. So he became the archetypal mentor representing the 2 I had met so far and trained with. And while I was working on the book, I wrote Peaceful Heart Warrior Spirit, the new book. I wrote it in 9 drafts, 9 full rewrites. And each time it changed, it transformed. I took a 500-page shaggy hedge of a book and turned it into a bonsai of just over 200 pages. I don't like to take up too much of readers' time. I like to put what I need to. See, people say, how do you know your legs are long enough? I say they reach the ground. In the same way, a book is long enough because it is cover to cover. So I had to do a lot of work. And in that process, my daughter, again, Sierra, now Joy, my wife Joy, has always been my first editor. She read every draft, gave me feedback. And as you know, she added commentaries in the book.
Yes.
So people get her take on what was going on as well. But only about 10 pages of the 200-page book. But she also served as a kind of editor and helping me glean it down from this massive self-indulgent overwriting, which I usually do first drafts. And Sierra, my daughter, said, "Hey, Dad, wouldn't it be fun if you had some dialogues with Socrates in this book?" And it immediately struck me, wouldn't that be fun? Especially after the small revelation I offer in the preface. So there are some, as you know, dialogues with this old guy, and it was like effortless to write. It was fun. I edited a little bit, but people feel the old energy who enjoyed my dialogues with Socrates and Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I think they'll get a kick out of these.
Well, no.
So, I don't know if that really answers the question you raised.
I don't think you need to worry about spoiler alert, because you come right out at the beginning of the book and you talk about Socrates. And I think we've all kind of grown since then. And I think some people might do the math and say, hey, this is part of Dan. So I guess my question would be for now is, how do you relate to Socrates now at this point in your life?
With great affection. As my muse and inspiration. It was 14 years after I met that old guy in the gas station. I have a letter I didn't put in the book, but I think I got an email, or it might have been an actually written letter from a young fellow whose grandfather worked the night shift at that old service station during the time I went to Berkeley. There's no sense giving his name out right now, but he was probably the same old guy I met. And 14 years later, when I was trying to figure out how to convey some ideas I wanted to share, he popped into my mind. And so I guess he became my muse. It took that form. You know, some people claim to channel these 20,000-year-old dead entities and discarnate people. And they channel these higher beings from outer space or Jesus or whoever.
Right? Yeah.
Interdimensional, yes. And to me, that's their muse. It inspires them, and it feels like a separate person. They've put it into a compartment. This is that person speaking wisdom to you. And I was able to write wiser words in Way of the Peaceful Warrior using him as my muse than I would have just being Dan Millman.
Mm-hmm. You know,
I wasn't ready to step into that role.
I understand perfectly. And thank you. I want to help out the guys out there. And one of the things that really impresses me about you that I could relate to is beyond the fact that you try a lot of different things, but you're a persistent person, and you are a perfectionist in a way, to a point. And athletics have always been kind of a grounding point for you. Could you talk to us about the importance particularly for guys, getting in touch with their body as part of their overall spiritual development, just life journey, etc.? Because many times, and of course, in today's day and age, you can do so many things remotely. You almost never have to get up or leave the house. You just sit behind your computer all day, and a lot of people do that. And I don't think it's really what was intended for us. And I always feel that, getting outside every day, you got to get outside. You got to put your feet on the ground. You got to take a breath of fresh air. You got to look at the back of the leaves. You got to listen to a bird chirp. You got to stay in touch with that stuff. How important was athletics? I think it's related to all of that, but to your development as a person and being able to become such an effective teacher.
Boy, so much came up for me during your question. Pop. I don't know where to start. Let me start here. In the movie Zorba the Greek, Anthony Quinn plays Zorba. And after somebody talked about some heady ideas, he said, if you could dance what you just said, I might understand. And yes, we all need to stay in touch with our bodies. But for men, I think it's this whole idea of being manly enough. Whether one is macho or not, we just want to be manly. Now, of course, we know today gender identity can be fluid, but anatomically, most of us, not everybody, but most of us have male anatomy or female anatomy, however we identify. And there are actually some rather interesting, but that would be for another program, our identities. And based on the three selves that I described in Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, there's a very interesting theory that I don't think anybody's ever raised about why people identify as they do. We say it's genetic. We don't know, but for guys, there is that concern. Am I manly enough? And so certain sports, combative sports, yes, I'm being manly. I'm doing rugby, football, basketball, and those things. Now, some of my friends used to tease me. Oh, you're in that sport, gymnastics. Don't they wear tights and slippers? And yet, Men's Health magazine, about 2 decades ago, rated men's gymnastics as the toughest sport in the world, just above bull riding and the triathlon. And they had a big algorithm in terms of how they computed, injury rates, the danger, how hard it is to begin, and so on. And people have seen gymnasts today and wonder how they do what they do and how they're, because they show they're very strong, and that's supposed to be masculine too, to be very strong.
Well, and rebounding's so big now too.
Yeah,
using a rebounder at home. Great workout.
I do. I have a rebounder I use every day.
Me too.
Running real fast, jumping up and down. Yeah, it's very good apparatus. and to music. See, if you talk about dance, well, men have to do a certain dance a certain way. They can't just move and flow to the rhythm. They tend to be a little more like muscular and tension. And we just have to get free of that thing. And when we're alone sometime, guys can put on music and just move around, and groove a little bit and be graceful. The first physical challenge I ever had, as I relate in the book, was I was about 9 or 10 years old when my mother, who played the piano, played for a modern dance class, didn't want to pay a babysitter, and so brought me to the class, enrolled me, and it was me and 9 or 10 girls in their tights and tutus, and I had to wear tights too. You can imagine how thrilled me as a 9-year-old boy would be to be in just a group of little girls. I didn't know how to deal with it, but it taught me muscular control. Refined muscular control. I know a modern dance teacher who you can point to any one of her toes and she can move that individually. That's the kind of refinement you learn. And I learned to point my toes. It helped me with trampoline and gymnastics and everything that followed. So again, I consider myself masculine, martial arts and athlete and so on, but I'm fairly balanced. I'm not the Marlboro man, the archetypes of the cowboy, who speaks low and acts a certain way. The samurai, who march around going, yosh, they have a very hyper masculine, if you've seen the samurai movies, Toshu Mifune and so on. And where the geisha, the women act like little girls, covering their mouth, going tee hee hee. And it's like hyper gender separation, where we need to find a balance. And I think it's healthier, actually. So that may be a bit of a tangent, but it's part of my character as it developed. And as you know, I was also bullied, and that's what sent me into the martial arts and training over time, and at 6 or 7 different arts throughout my life, pretty much. So anyway, that's what helped shape me. And I thank you for asking the question that sent me off in that wild goose chase.
And another way of helping guys, Dan, and I just have a few more questions. I know we're jamming on time. How do you recommend that today's men manage pressure and anger?
Yes, I have a few pointed things to say in brief. First of all, as I learned from the sage, my 4th mentor, it's very important for us to accept our emotions and our thoughts as natural to us in the moment. Sometimes I feel angry or happy or sad or afraid or delighted. It changes. Emotions change all the time. They pass through us like the weather. I spoke at San Quentin prison once to a number of inmates. And one of them came up to me and said, Dan, I have a problem with rage. And I looked at him and I looked up at him. He was a big guy. And I said, no, you don't. And he said, yes, I do. And I said, no, you don't. He said, yes, I do. He was getting pretty upset. And I said, no, rage is not a problem. It's like an emotional storm. The problem is what you do when you're enraged. And a light bulb went on for him, because he couldn't control his emotions. Emotions change all the time. We can't will ourselves to feel differently from the way we do in the moment. There are occasions we've snapped out of it, gotten distracted, but usually not. But he could get a handle on what he did, how he behaved. And so when he got out, we formed a strategy. When you get out and your wife makes you crazy again, slam the door while you're leaving the room. Express yourself that way so you can't hurt your wife anymore if you're in a different room. So he learned a strategy for changing his behavior. And anger management courses don't stop anger. They change behavior. You learn to count 10. You do strategies, whatever it is. So in terms of anger, it's fine to be angry. I'm angry sometimes. I feel all these things sometimes. But the question always becomes, what will you do? Will you let impulse just take over? Or will you acknowledge you have anger, honor it? solve the problem. What is creating the anger? And fix it. Maybe you're justified in your anger, but you don't have to behave in an angry fashion, in an impulsive fashion. And that we do have control over. I learned that from the sage. I knew that, and yet, Andre Gide, the great philosopher, he once said, everything that needs to be said has already been said, but it needs to be said again because no one was really paying attention. So what I'm doing is phrasing things in a certain way, as the sage did, offering these reminders of what we already know, but we tend to forget. And as far as pressure and stress go, we can't control stress. There are situations we'll meet that are stressful. But I'll tell you this, stress while being relaxed is very different from stress while being tense. And as it happens, even though we may not be able to control stress or pressure situations, we can take a deep breath. We can shake loose and relax our body. Everyone can control that. We can relax the body and take a deep breath. And can you imagine saying, oh, I'm so stressed right now. But at the same time, our body is relaxed. And that can reduce or eliminate many of the negative effects of stress. So yeah, let's go through stress together. I get stressed sometimes, but I'm relaxed. I've learned to do that. And that's what I advise.
Okay, last question for you, Dan, and thank you. The name of the book, Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, The True Story of My Spiritual Quest, Dan Millman, the author of the seminal book, Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Dan, what if you could talk to a younger version of yourself? I have an 8-year-old, and you went through some things as a 9-year-old. If you could talk to you, the 9-year-old version of Dan Millman right now, what would you tell him?
Well, it's, as you know, it's not always easy to talk to an 8-year-old in a way that they can get. Their attention is on, but I get the idea. My younger self, what advice would I give?
Yes.
By the way, I have an 8-year-old, a 5.5-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old grandchildren now.
Fantastic.
And so I have that experience of reawakening to life all over again. But what I would hope for all of them and my younger self is I would say, please remember to trust your process. Trust your life unfolding. Stop comparing yourself to other people. That is a profound disrespect to yourself, because you're either going to feel superior or inferior. And when I was a young coach at Stanford University, I realized some people learned somersaults faster than others, but those who took longer to learn sometimes learn them better than those who learn them faster. So we need to trust our own way of learning, our own interests, our own talents and values and interests, and find our own life and our own path. So I'm not suggesting to people that they follow my path or find my mentors, but to be guided with the broader perspectives that I share. And I think when people come out of it, I hope they will start to honor themselves in their own path and their own courage, and that they are peaceful warriors in training right now in the School of Daily Life.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you, Dan, for all of your contributions. There's many more to come, but you've really impacted humanity, impacted the world. You've helped me a lot, and you helped our audience. And I thank you for being on Guys Radio again. I love the book. The name of it is Peaceful Heart, Warrior Spirit, The True Story of My Spiritual Quest. Dan Millman on Guys Radio. Thank you, Dan, and happy holidays to you.
Thank you, Robert.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support us by subscribing to our channels. Thanks.